The Saga of Baby Divine by Bette Midler. The skies were ablaze with disorder that night, the planets aghast and a quiver. The delirious moon had the brass to be full when it should have been only a sliver. A comet appeared, and those who dared peek say stars fell to earth in a panic. Historians claim that the cosmos eclipsed the excess of Daryl F. Zanuck. Yes, heaven had worked itself into a frenzy of wild and descendant design to herald the glory of what was to come, the birth of Baby Divine. Oh, Baby Divine, what an entrance, as demure as the 4th of July, and Mr. and Mrs. Divine didn't know if they ought to rejoice or to cry. Poor dears, they had lived a most circumspect life in a house on a nondescript road, surrounded by houses exactly like theirs and with neat little lawns neatly mowed. And since nothing too madcap or garish or wacky was ever allowed in that quarter, the proper divines had good reason to hope for a proper, presentable daughter. So, you can imagine their terrible shock when they laid down their babe in her bed and found she'd arrived with high heels on her feet and a sprig of red hair on her head. But the heels and the hairdo were only the prologue. Another great shock lay in store, for their baby had already mastered a word, and the word she had mastered was more. Yes, more, she crowed clearly, and yet again more. The elder divines nearly fainted. Then she followed that feat with a luminous smile, much as Giotto himself might have painted. But while the divines stood there wringing their hands, there were cheers in another location, a section of town the divine only knew by its scurrilous reputation, where baubles and bangles and silly ensembles replaced polyester and chintz, and no one would deem it outrageous if a baby wore heels or a red henna rinse. In fact, who would notice a baby at all, no matter how chubby her torso, when day after day was like Mardi Gras time, a night after night even more so? Here, no one would snub you or look down their nose if your coat or your mind were in tatters. Be what you want to be, that was their creed. It's the state of your spirit that matters. And smack in the midst of this hullabaloo in a boarding house close to the track, snoozed 3 dizzy dames whose rooms seemed to have undergone a ferocious attack. Lily and Tilly and Joyce were their names, and they lived in a heap on the floor. At lunch and at length they would gab about art and theatrical legend and lore. For Tilly had been born in the days of her youth, adored as a terpsichorean. She danced with abandon and not too much else, yet never approached the obscene. And Lily sang opera and lieder and such, and was quite the tempestuous wench. She sang with a passion and diction to match, but lamentably only in French. And Joyce, she told jokes that were top of the line, like the one about Midge and Godzilla. 22 people died laughing at that one. The punchline was really a killer. Well, as legend goes, on the night of the birth, ribbons and radiant light awakened Miss Tilly, who ran to the window and squawked like a duck at the sight. Girls, girls, get up right away. Come here, look outside, do you see? The sky over there by the House of Divine is lit up like a giant marquee. Well, needless to say, at the sound of that word, the ladies leapt up in a flash, for it harkened them back to those ballyhoo days when their act was a certified smash. They pulled off their jammies, they threw on their pearls, they powdered and rouged to excess. They bumbled and fumbled and flew down the street till they came to the hallowed address. They stood on the doorstep and gaped at the sky. A shower of sheet music fell. They shrieked, "What is going on around here?" and nervously rang the front bell. But no one came forward to pierce the enchantment. They felt they were lost in a dream. "I say," Lily whispered, "this is rather odd. If they don't answer soon, I shall scream." "Oh, calm down," Joyce hissed. "Lily, calm down this instant. Some restraint for a change would be nice." Yes, restraint would be nice, Joyce said over again, for she loved to say everything twice. "Now cut it out, ladies," Miss Tilly chimed in. "This isn't the time to be fighting. Just look at the sky. Why, I could have been a star if I'd had this lighting." At last the Devines opened the front door. "We gave at the office," they said, but the overwrought trio paid no heed at all, for they'd spotted the babe in her bed. "Brava! Oh, brava!" they squealed at the child as they elbowed her parents aside in their hurry to hug her and swoon at her feet. The starchy Devines nearly died. "Just look at those fabulous shoes," Tilly shouted. "I wish I could get me a pair. And who could resist that ridiculous smile or the color and curl of that hair?" Then Tilly untangled her favorite boa, more precious than diamonds or fur, and said, "I got this from an ardent marquis, but now she must have it. It's hers." And Joyce offered up a decrepit false note, which she swore was bequeathed by the Tsar. It's a prop for those times when you want to become someone else than who you are. And Lil said, "My gift may seem less than expected, but my dear, it's far more than it seems." And proudly she pulled from the depths of her handbag a flutter of rainbows and dreams. Baby Devine was quite giddy with joy. She felt her young heart start to soar. She wanted to sing, "Oh, you've made me so happy," but all she could manage was, "More!" "I'm sorry, how awful," cried Mrs. Devine, "my own flesh and blood, and so ungrateful." "Oh, pipe down," said Tilly. "Be proud that she's talking. It's really more funny than hateful." "So true," nodded Lil. "Why, it's actually charming and good for the kid to want more. Total contentment is only for cows. It tends to turn tots into boars." "Stop it! Get out!" bellowed Mr. Devine. "This baby is batty enough. The last thing we need is to have her head filled with that bohemian stuff." "Well," sniffed the three, stomping out in a huff and muttering much as they went, "these people are fools. Can't they see that that kid has undoubtedly been heaven sent?" Now, the baby, of course, didn't mean to say more. She meant to say thanks, which is far more polite. She was feeling despondent and misunderstood when suddenly out went the light. Baby Devine didn't care for the dark. Still, she wasn't exactly afraid, for in the next room were her ma and her pa, and the sleepy time noises they made. "That's my pillow, dear, and move over, please," were some of the sounds that she heard. But then the poor baby heard something so frightful she wished that she'd not heard a word. "That baby's not ours," her father exclaimed. "Those shoes and that hair, she's a quack. I'm positive somebody made a mistake. Should we think about giving her back?" "Oh dear," sighed her mother. "I know what you mean. If only she weren't so flashy. I know that is odd for a mother to say, but I find her, well, just a bit trashy." The baby recoiled as if someone had slapped her. This censure was so unexpected. Was she really so worthless, really so strange? Why was she being rejected? To whom could she turn? From whom could she learn what it takes in this life to belong? Those ladies who gave her the presents, of course, they could tell her at once what was wrong. But where were they now? And what did it matter? She was, after all, just a tyke. She never could reach them from where she was lying. The front door alone was a hike. It would take her forever to crawl on all fours, but the child, ever hopeful, thought maybe if she tried very hard, she could walk like a grown-up and not have to creep like a baby. She pulled herself up to the edge of her cradle and tossed herself out on that chance. She found out at once she could not walk a step, but whoopee, she could ever dance. She whirled and she twirled on the tips of her toes. She unveiled an exquisite plie. She crashed through the door with a wild pirouette and eagerly went on her way. But she only got one entreshot out the door when she suddenly stopped on a dime, and her heart skipped a beat as gasping she gazed on the world for the very first time. Trees under starlight, meadows in mist, houses and fences and sky. When the moon sallied forth from behind a black cloud, why, baby divine thought she'd die. And there in the moonlight she glimpsed a white rose her mother had planted in spring. Her kneecaps grew weak with the beauty of it, and her broken heart started to sing. More, more, she shrieked and she cried, and almost as if the world had heard, a sycamore rustled, and out of the tree flew a rather preposterous bird. Holy Toledo, thought Divine. Baby Divine, whoever conceived of such things? A creature that's able to fly through the air, and what a thrill it must be to have wings. And then, just as though the bird read baby's mind, he lightly touched down on her shoulder. You're right, it's a thrill. Come and see for yourself. You can trust me, the scruffy bird told her. 'Cause I've been around, I've been up and I've been down. I look and I listen, I learn. It's a tricky old globe kid, and I ought to know, 'cause I'm not just some dim-witted tern. And I bet that a baby with heels and red hair will probably think it's terrific. You'll squeal with delight as we go for the sun and applaud when we hit the Pacific. Well, not on your life would our baby divine say no to a chance to go soaring. She clambered right up on the little bird's back, and she was really quite mad for exploring. Off they both sailed toward a dinner plate moon, over highways and houses and trees. They soared with panache through a cloud made of silk and a bumbling of vagabond bees. But while baby divine and the bird were in heaven, her parents were down in the dumps, for they'd found to their horror their offspring was missing, and brother, did they feel like chumps. It was Mrs. Divine who discovered the fact that their little touch cradle was bare, and she'd gone in to change both the babe and her bottle, and only the bottle was there. How pale with foreboding, she flew to the door, crying out to her spouse, "There's a track! The footsteps are teensy and murder to follow, but darling, we must fetch her back." The anxious divines grabbed their coats and their flashlights and started to follow the trail, but 20 yards into the garden it stopped. Their girl hunt seemed destined to fail. Was she snatched off the earth? Was she deep in a hole? Was she kidnapped? Oh no, God forbid. Who'd kidnap that screwball? Of course, it's those dames. They sure were gung-ho for the kid. "Let's find them," cried Mrs. Divine, "and confront them. I know we can ferret them out." And off they both ran, while a mile overhead the babe and the bird soared about. Curving around moonbeams, they dipped with the breeze. Higher, still higher they flew. The baby was stunned when she glanced toward the earth and beheld the spectacular view. But it wasn't the beauty alone that amazed her, though that in itself was to die. What caused her red hair to uncurl was how odd her neighborhood looked from the sky. For everything that she had thought was so big looked terribly puny and small, and what seemed hugely important close up seemed not that important at all. For instance, her house, which had seemed so enormo, was hardly Tyrannosaurus Rex, and the town she called home just a glimmer of lights in the shape of a capital X. Of course, baby divine, being smart as a whip, did not feel confused, but instead felt the glorious thrill she would feel every time a great truth penetrated her head. The truth. It's the point of your view that decides what you see. One man's flop is another man's hit. From manners to movies, the picture keeps changing, depending upon where you sit. But still, there was more for the baby to absorb as they zigzagged their way through the sky, and further surprise was that even the mountains all looked just alike from on high. And she thought, why, if it's such a job for a mountain to stand out from all of the rest, how hard it must be for a minuscule human. And suddenly, baby felt blessed. My shoes, my red hair, that's my card, she thought, when her brain formed this pithy bon mot. Cherish forever what makes you unique, 'cause you're really a yawn if it goes. The baby felt like Einstein, like Kant, like Descartes, as she pondered this new revelation to the wonders and whimsical ways of the world. Her soul gave a standing ovation. Now, just at that moment, the elder divines arrived at the ladies' front doors. They barged right on in and tripped over Lil, who was out like a light on the floor. Then they yelled in the darkness, give us our baby. The ladies awoke to a scare as the frantic divines fairly ransacked their room in search of some shining red hair. How dare you accuse us? The dames were aghast. This insult is too much to take. One look at their faces convinced the divines they had made an appalling mistake. We're friends, Tilly cried. You should ask for our help, which of course we'd be tickled to grant. You take the high road and we'll take the low road, Lily trilled in a dainty descant. Her voice was so piercing the babe could have heard, but a thunderstorm rose from the sea. Though the bird and the babe did their best to avoid it, the tempest would not let them be. It smacked them and racked them and blew them around till they shook like a crepe paper ship. Then on them one blast of thunder and horror of horrors, baby divine lost her grip. Head over diaper, she fell toward the earth so swiftly she heard the wind whine. She clasped her small hands and looked towards the heaven and prayed she was truly divine. And as fate would have it, her shoes saved the day, for though she came down like a rock, her heels were designed by Monsieur Charles Jourdan, so of course they absorbed all the shock. But though she survived, she was still in a pickle, alone and so far from her home. If only somebody would come by to help her and lend her a map or a comb. Ever brave and resourceful, the baby thought, wait, I really must try and calm down. I'll just stretch out my hands and flap like the bird till I flap myself right off the ground. Then in her mind's eye she saw herself clearly falling again from the sky. Kaboom went her heart, her legs turned to jelly, her mouth tasted tinny and dry. You'll never fly, boomed a voice from the dark, and a terror-struck baby divine, as a figure in black lumbered toward her and thundered, At last, little lady, you're mine. The figure was fearful and dismal and huge and wrapped in a sulphurous fog. It had snakes around its ankles and moss around its heart, and its voice was hoarse as a frog's. Even the moon was afraid of its presence and hurriedly slipped out of sight. The air grew chilly and sickly and damp, and a tremor of dread shook the night. I am anxiety, friend to despair. I appear when your courage departs. I find you whenever your confidence fails you and fear makes a home in your heart. Ooh. Well, baby divine didn't like this at all. In fact, she was frightened to death. She started to dance away as fast as she could, but the poor thing was soon out of breath. Go on, cried anxiety. Dance for your life. This isn't the last time we'll meet. You better learn now there's no way to escape me, for I'm very fast on my feet. To show her the terrible truth in his words, the figure, colossal and dank, charged through the night after baby Divine, and as it pursued her, it stank. It stank and globbled and belched, and as it lurched toward the baby who fell in a swoon, and it came closer, its eyes caught on fire, and midnight lit up like high noon. Then, oh, in a moment too creepy to mention, the fiend bent down with a grunt. He picked up the child by the scruff of her neck and said, "Say your goodbyes, you runt." He swung her way out like a doll on a string. From his throat came a deafening roar, but all the poor baby could do was to scream, for the last thing she wanted, "More! More, more," she pathetically piped, and instantly she became very aware of the dangers inherent in having a limited vocabulary. "Well, I've had it now," the besieged baby thought as she whizzed past those eyeballs in flames, when suddenly who should sprint onto the scene but those three irrepressible dames. Anxiety reared up and howled when he saw them. Undaunted, Lil cried, "Fiddlesticks, just look at that big bag of wind. What a humbug. Let's hit him over with our bag of tricks." Lil opened the onslaught by screeching off key. Joyce battered the thing with some shtick, crying, "On guard," till he finished him off with a rather unladylike kick. "Whew, that was close," said Miss Tilly to Joyce. "It's a good thing we tracked down the kid." Baby Divine arabesqued in relief, and they laughed till they all fell on the ground. And anxiety, lurking in shadows nearby, fled in a mad disarray, for a good hearty laugh was a threat to his health and certain to drive him away. The baby was bug-eyed. Where did the fiend come from? He sensed a divine revelation. The beast had been born of her very own fears. The monster was her own creation. "You imp! Why, you imp!" cried a breathless Miss Joyce. "You put us through torture," cried Lily. "Now, girls," Tilly said, "grab a hold of yourselves. To be mad at an infant is silly. Just think of the problems this kid had to face. She's as mixed up as Lily Chop Suey. She's got to be taught what's important and what is only a crockful of hooey." And Lil said, "Then laughter's the place to begin. It keeps life from being a bore. With a good sense of humor, she'll always be rich. Without one, she'll always be poor." Baby Divine sat and played with her step-ins. Joyce murmured, "But where shall we start? Laughter, like life, comes in all shapes and sizes. She must learn to tell them apart." "Let's start with the giggles," said Lil. "It's the smallest, and rather undignified, too. Giggles and titters are laughs that slip out whenever a laugh is taboo. Next, there's the chuckle, a satisfied laugh, a cluck to yourself that feels good." Baby Divine fluffed some hairs on her head and chuckled 'cause she understood. But then there's the mean and insensitive snicker, disrespectful and low on civility. It's a bit hard for a child of your taste and highly refined sensibility. Poor Baby Divine had to race to keep up. She'd not heard these distinctions before. She wanted to scream, "I have had quite enough," but out came her usual more. "Well, all right," said Tilly. "Let's end with the loudest, the mighty and rowdy guffaw. When you're guffawing, you're laughing so hard you may end up flat on the floor." Well, Baby Divine thought guffaw sounded great, raucous and free and sublime, and she threw back her head and she doubled in half and laughed for the very first time. And oh, it felt good just to laugh and to laugh. Such a whoopingly nice thing to do. She thought, "I must do this a lot in my life and make sure that others do too." Then Joyce said, now, child, that's enough. Not all things in life are so droll. A good laugh is good for the spirits, it's true. but a good cry is good for the soul. And with that, the ladies began to boo-hoo and to weep and to wail and to moan, and teardrops welled up in their eyes like the sea, and many a nose was blown. But Baby Divine simply hadn't a clue as to what they were doing or why. Said Lily, that's simply a brief demonstration of a sad little verb, to cry. However, cried Lily, let's not dwell on that. The child has absorbed quite a lot, and crying is something she'll learn by her lonesome, whether she wants to or not. So stop with the lesson. Let's give her a treat. The show that once made us all famous. What's a show, thought the babe, and she hoped against hope that she wasn't a short ignoramus. But we did so many, whined Tilly, perplexed. What do you think would please her? The pageant, the farce, the mystery play, or the ear scene from Julius Caesar? Something with music, of course, cried Miss Tilly. We want to show off all of our stuff. There'll be kick lines and punch lines and ditties and such. But he who first cries, hold enough. There's no time to dally, let's put it in gear, and they flew like the Giselles on their way. Baby Divine did her best to keep up with a perfectly swell grand jeté. They came to a halt in a darkened backyard where some laundry was hung on a line, and they vowed as they pulled off the things that they needed, we'll have them back in no time. Till they wrapped round her tummy a colorful sheet, as they do in some Russian resorts, while Joyce tried to fashion the folle bergère from an elderly gentleman's shorts. Lily encircled her head so many times in a towel that still was quite damp. On top of this turban she placed some red cherries and bellowed, now ladies, let's vamp. For it is nearly midnight, our costumes are done, and each is a stellar creation. It's truly amazing what you can pull off if you use your imagination. Oh no, what's that? The babe wondered, confused. Then Lil said, add this to your list. Your imagination's the talent to think of things that don't really exist. Now, all that we need, Tilly furrowed her brow, are some lights and a stage and a curtain. Why, Tilly, chirped Lily, just open your eyes. We've plenty to work with, that's certain. The tree stump will serve as a marvelous stage. The moon will provide us with light. And what better curtain than those lovely willows? That baby could tell Lil was right. Now places, Lil shouted, the show must go on. And oh, from the very first cue, the act was a clutter of thrilling delights. There was nothing those gals couldn't do. Lil sang an air about things in Montmartre and the contraband truffles they sold. Her hair stood on end as she hit the last note, and a poodle nearby passed out cold. And Joyce came on stage as a pizza to go. There never was anyone like her. Her jokes were so funny that Baby Divine thought that someone had best change her diaper. Tilly performed a short tango to start, then offered a sparkling gavotte when segued right into a one-footed hula that had them all glued to the spot. More, more, cried Baby Divine. She'd never seen grown-ups so jolly. Then she noticed that Lily was calling for her to join in the gala finale. That's all that it took. She jumped to her feet. Her soul heard the call of the stage. She was running full tilt towards the lights and the magic when a voice bellowed out in rage. You on stage? What astonishing gall. You're nothing, a washout, a nerd. You think you're so cute and so charming? Well, kid, you're not only dumb, you're absurd. Yes, there was anxiety right on the stage, and ugly and heartless as ever. What's stopping you, sweetheart? Lost all your nerve? Well, guess what? You'll never find it, never. Now, the ladies were quite unaware of the brute. They continued their warbling and wiggling right in the face of the furious fiend, and suddenly Baby was giggling. That's right, Baby giggled, and then she guffawed when the monster could just not believe. The stronger her laughter, the weaker he grew, till he sheepishly squeaked, think I'll leave. He practically tripped over Tilly's pink sheet in his hurry to exit stage right. He shrank like a sweater till all that was left was a grimace of rage in the night. And then it was over. The terror was gone. Baby flew on the stage. Some primeval instinct propelled her down center, and theatrical art came of age. And then we have a song called More, which I'm not going to sing because I can't read music. And as the spectacular drew to its close, who should come out of the woods but the elder divine who watched open-mouthed as their baby delivered the goods. They heard her sing note after note. They heard her chasse like Pavlova. The staggering passion she brought to her act was something they couldn't get over. How foolish they felt, how stupidly stuffy they'd been, too myopic to see their child was a treasure, a gem to be cherished, a baby divine indeed. Mr. and Mrs. Divine were ecstatic. They whistled, they stomped, and they cheered. When they called to their baby, "We love you, we love you," the babe shed her very first tear. Finally, all of the bows were completed. The ebullient Mrs. Divine rushed up to her child, throwing flowers and kisses, crying, "Oh, I'm so glad you are mine." "Now wait," said Miss Tilly, "I must ask the kid if she thought we were good or a bore." But the only response out of Baby Divine, of course you have guessed it, is more. "Oh no," laughed Miss Joyce with a sigh of relief. "No more. Please, no more for tonight. In a very few moments the sun will be up, and we're not at our best in the light. So come, everyone, the festivity's over. It's time we headed back home. There are limits to everything, even to fun. Remember what happened to Rome." And off went the troupe, a most fetching sextet, all happily prancing away. Her mom and her dad beamed as Baby kept up with a turbulent pas de bourrée. They were all out of breath when they reached the Divines. The baby had tripped once or twice, and there at the doorway the ladies bent down and panted this prudent advice: "Make sure that your life is a rare entertainment. It doesn't take anything drastic. You needn't be gorgeous or wealthy or smart, just very enthusiastic." The baby looked up with great love in her heart, quite moved by her friend's words, and farewells took place as one only finds in later Victorian fiction. The ladies soon vanished like stars in the morning, for daylight was quickly advancing. The elder Divine said, "It's been quite a night, dear. It's sleep you need now. No more dancing." Baby Divine sashayed through the door, and into her cradle she leapt. Her eyes were half closed. She was pooped as can be, but so glad that she hadn't slept. For she'd learned how to laugh, and she'd learned how to cry, and to use her imagination. The loss of some sleep seemed a small price to pay for such a divine education. And just to make everything even more rosy, her folks said, "We know we were rude, but won't you forgive us? We love you like crazy." Then they kissed her and tenderly cooed this lullaby, which again I won't sing. Then they tucked in her boa, they smoothed her red hair. Then the elder Divines went to bed. Baby Divine was alone in the dark, but it no longer filled her with dread, for she thought of her folks and the dances and the dames and their gifts, the garland, the bow of the nose, and she thought of the bird that had taken her soaring, and she thought of her mother's white rose. And Baby Divine felt the call and the challenge of life and the urge to explore. She vowed as she started to dream of tomorrow to never stop calling for more. And that's the inside cover of the book. The end.